And joining us now, Pennsylvania GOP Senator Dave McCormick. Great to have you with us in person.
Good morning.
Okay, so you're going to be on the Foreign Relations Committee. You have served in national security previously. So let's talk about where we are with this deal coming together in Israel. We're awaiting to see the hostages released. There are real questions about post-conflict governance in Gaza, what role we play. What should it be?
Yeah, well, first, it's great to be with you today. And you can just feel it in Washington. We talked about this sense of enthusiasm and optimism that we're entering a new phase of security and prosperity. And so I'm excited to be here and excited to be part of it. My wife and I had the opportunity last January to visit Kfar Aza right after, a month or two after the horrible assaults on October 7th. We saw what the savages from Hamas had done on that terrible day. So I hate the fact that it's a necessity to negotiate with Hamas, but in the end, that was what was necessary to get the hostages out. And we have to recognize we would not be in this position had President Trump not assumed the presidency, because that changed the negotiating dynamic. And if Israel hadn't, for the last year, really destroyed much of the Hamas capability, that's what made this negotiation possible. And now we have the opportunity to bring our hostages home. And my understanding is 2 of those hostages were from Kfar Aza, which is great. My wife and I have met with many hostage families over the year. So this is a great day to bring those hostages home, and hopefully as many of them are as alive as possible. But we have to recognize the ceasefire won't be sustained unless all the hostages come home. And ultimately, Hamas is a terrorist organization. You can't live 600 feet away from people that want to slit your throat in the middle of the night. So Hamas has to be eradicated, and this ceasefire is hopefully the first step.
So who governs in Gaza? What about the rebuilding there? There's obviously been, what happens in a war, there's been a lot of destruction and displacement, but somebody has to fill that gap, because we know what happens when there's a vacuum.
Well, I know there's a number of different options. The principles have to be, first and foremost, that Israel has to have security. That's an uncompromisable. Second, is Hamas can't be in a governing role. They've had the opportunity to govern, and it's been a disaster for the people there. I'm hoping that many states in the region, countries in the region, will be willing to help. But there has to be a governance structure that brings the people of Gaza that are willing to be peace-loving people out of poverty and in a position where they can have opportunity. That's going to be the long-term goal. But security comes first.
I want to jump to our other headline this morning about TikTok going dark. There are millions of people very upset, distraught about this across the country. But there are many people, including the bipartisan group of lawmakers who passed this, who said there is a real national security threat. The Supreme Court on Friday upheld this bill, saying you don't have to get rid of TikTok, but you've got to divest. And we're getting news this morning that President Trump may be willing to work out a deal where there is still some level of Chinese ownership, as long as there are firewalls there. Is that good enough, in your opinion?
Well, listen, I think it's clear that from a national security perspective, you cannot have the communist Chinese controlling and owning TikTok when we have 170 million users in the United States controlling that messaging, that data, which is a huge national security problem. So I think that's clear. The law essentially requires a pause. That's what we're in now, a pause, unless there's a divestiture that puts it outside the control of the communist Chinese. It's going to require creativity. It's going to require a great deal making. I can't think of anybody better than President Trump to be able to find some sort of negotiated solution, but what that'll be, I don't know.
Well, so some of your new colleagues over there in the Senate, including Senator Tom Cotton, who has been a big critic of China on many fronts for a long time, he said this morning that he's glad it's gone dark. They had time. The bill was very clear on what needed to happen with the divestiture. They didn't get it done, and there shouldn't be efforts at resuscitating it this morning, especially now hearing from President Trump that he may be okay with some level of Chinese ownership. I'm guessing that might require a change, something that you guys are going to have to pass. I mean, would you be comfortable with that?
Well, we'll have to see, but the law is clear. So at this point, there's going to have to be some sort of negotiated solution that ultimately meets the law. We're going to have to change the law. And at this point, I'm not sure where President Trump's going to take it, but the fact that he's going to now have the ball, for lack of a better term, I think puts us in a position where there might be a good outcome that could both keep TikTok in place, but also protect us from the communist Chinese owning it, which again is a national security threat.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of other foreign policy issues. There's this issue of tariffs. Our polling shows that most Americans are worried about it. They think it may hurt the U.S. economy. But President Trump has talked big about that. We don't know how much of that is negotiating or if these are the numbers he intends to stick with. Meanwhile, a leader in Canada says this: I see energy as Canada's queen in this game of chess. We don't need to expose our queen too early. The opposition does need to know the queen exists, but they don't need to know what we do with the queen. They supply us with significant amounts of crude, natural gas, electricity. How worried about this are you, where this could go?
Listen, when President Trump was campaigning across Pennsylvania and I was campaigning, we were promising change, big change. And that's what the Trump agenda will be. And that's the kind of things I'll vote for. The change was to get our economy back on track, get inflation under control, secure the border, stop the flow of fentanyl, and unlock energy. And that's what his agenda is going to be on day one, I believe, with these executive orders. That's what the legislative agenda is going to look like. Tariffs are an important part of that agenda. I've said all along, tariffs for strategic purposes to make sure they protect key industries that are critical to our security. Tariffs to make sure we have reciprocity, a fair deal. And Canada, among many countries, including China, we have unfair trading practices with them. We're not getting a fair deal. Americans are not getting fair trade. And so in order to get that, using tariffs to achieve fairness for the American worker, the American people, I'm all for. And Canada is far from perfect in terms of its relationships with the United States, and President Trump's going to make sure we get a fair shot.
Okay, working together on the Hill, you and your fellow Pennsylvania Senator, Democrat Sen Fetterman, who's joined us on the show. I got to put up this picture of you guys. You're out to dinner with your wives on a double date, and basically saying there are all kinds of things you can cooperate on: stopping the spread of fentanyl, fighting anti-Semitism, supporting Israel, providing best constituent services. He's also broken with Democrats on some issues regarding the border. Is this just a small glimmer of bipartisan hope, or do you think there are bigger issues that he and other Democrats you'll be able to work together on?
Well, I'm optimistic. I mean, I like Senator Fetterman. We had a great dinner. I mean, my wife was teasing me. People were lining up to say hello to us, and they were all new Senator Fetterman. They say, hello, Senator Fetterman. Then he finally said, well, he's a senator, too. So,
he's the new guy.
He's the new guy. So, first, the thing he talks about, which is the same thing I talk about, which is I wasn't elected to represent only Republicans. I was elected to represent every single Pennsylvanian. I think that's the way he feels. And so even though we're from different parties, we have a mandate to help Pennsylvania. He's focused on working families. I'm focused on working families. We think we can do find some common ground together. He's been an incredibly strong voice on Israel, against anti-Semitism, for Israel. We find common ground on that. We're going to disagree on some things, but we'll disagree agreeably, and we'll focus on the things we can work on together. And I think he recognizes what many Democrats haven't recognized yet, which is the policies of President Biden and his party failed the American people. And we have a mandate for change, and I think Senator Fetterman's embracing some of that, at least, and saying, hey, how can I be part of that change?
Oh, quickly, I want to put up a list here. Politico has ranked a number of the president's nominees coming in. This is the list of, they say, headaches. This is the headache category. Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., and Kash Patel. Have you met with all of them? Do you have any concerns remaining about them?
I haven't met with all of them, but my philosophy is President Trump had a mandate for change. He needs a team that can be disruptive. It's addressed. I didn't meet a single person. I had 3.4 million people vote for me. Not a single one of them said, we want the status quo or the establishment leading us forward. They want disruptors. They want outside the box thinking. They want change. And so my goal is to support his team and try to get them in place. I also have responsibility as a senator to advise and consent. Mm-hmm. So I'm meeting with every one of them. I'm watching those hearings closely. When I'm in the committee, I'm participating. And my goal is to help him get the team he wants, but I'm also going to take that responsibility seriously. All
right, Senator McCormick, great to have you here today. Welcome to Washington, and we'll see you around town.
All right, thank you. Nice to see you.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.